My space, your space, your space, my space, our space, one space love, one space love, one space love.
Welcome, Garrett Cato, to the One Space Love Show. How are you doing today up in Byron?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me to come on your show. It's a privilege. Thank you.
I was introduced to you through actually Radio Byron and just been watching you, the music getting bigger and bigger. And I just felt drawn to have you on. I thought this was the timing. And then how beautiful that you're actually bringing out a track today on the day that we're interviewing, and we'll be airing this after the track has come out. But the track is called Firestarter. I think let's start there because it's such an exciting day for you. It comes out in Australia now, and I think very shortly it'll be out around the world. So let's start there.
It's one of the first track I wrote during the sort of, I guess when we were in lockdown last year. It was the first track I did, and we just jumped on the computer, me and my friend Ainsley, and she's my friend since the co-write, but we hadn't really known each other. I was just a fan of hers, and she essentially said, yeah, sure, I'll write with you. And we kind of just started to get to know each other at first, and then we started sort of talking about our lives. And, she had just gone through like a breakup and stuff, and she was in a pretty dramatic space in her life. And, I was just sort of coming to grips with the world changing so much in, a span of a few months. So we kind of came up with this sort of song. It almost has an old school kind of feel to it a bit, but she's such an old soul, Ainsley. So writing with her was such a privilege to be able to kind of tap into that other side of music that I normally don't get to play around with. So it was really cool, and I feel like you can really feel her presence in the song for sure with the writing experience. So yeah, you
describe it as a longing for human connection. I loved that description when you brought out the song. So I mean, it's really got that kind of mythical, eerie sense to it that you can see like the storytelling in it. So that's Ainsley Wills that you collaborated with, and she's based down in Melbourne.
Yeah, she's in Melbourne, and she's a fantastic songwriter and got a great voice, and just has this really effortless way that she writes a song. And that was kind of the basic idea. Like I find sometimes when I write music with people or even by myself that the intent isn't so clear. Like I almost like to write from a subconscious standpoint where I kind of just let things fall out of me a little bit, and I guess vice versa with the other person. And then afterwards you kind of assess the damage almost. You kind of just see, okay, what is this saying? Because I think a lot of good writing comes from more of a subconscious place than a literal place. I think a lot of the time we kind of rely on our analytical side of the brain to write, but I think our more sort of spiritual side and sort of the more intuitive side is definitely something that I like to trust most when I'm writing, if that makes sense. So
completely. I mean, I also heard that you wrote, you're quite an introvert and quite a sensitive guy, if I'm saying it correctly. And so your creative process is, I loved how you described it was almost like painting a landscape and just letting the creative process come through you, and that you had to sometimes create space for that to happen, for you to be the messenger to come through. Can you share a little bit more on the creative process?
It's really interesting. It's kind of like, it kind of has to feel like play. Like when I was really young, when I was like a little kid, I would spend hours in my room just playing by myself, drawing, just acting out little scenes and things. And I feel like it's just the evolution of that, really. Like I kind of have to feel like I'm in this safe little bubble where I can kind of try things and make mistakes and just see what works. And then, sometimes like you can work on a song. Like I've worked on songs for like a week and then just scrapped it because it just wasn't quite the right thing, or I just didn't feel right, and then sometimes songs fall out of me that happen in, a matter of hours or something. And I literally wake up the next day with it recorded, and I'm like, wow, where did this come from? So it's such an elusive thing. And I think that's the best thing about it, because it's quite romantic when it's like that, when you don't really know what it is that drives you to write, or when it's going to happen. So you kind of sit down and you're kind of ready for anything. And I think if you're an optimistic person, then it's definitely can be quite a, you know, like a beautiful experience doing it by yourself and just sort of producing end to end, like recording yourself and mixing the record and putting all the elements that you want in. And then at the end of the day, it's sort of this little piece of artwork that you've made and you show people, and you know, it's kind of up to them whether they like it or not. And at the end of the day, your job's kind of done as soon as you finish. So yeah, so that's kind of how I look at it, I guess, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a very intimate experience that you have, and then
Yeah.
you share it, and you hope that others get to connect through your authenticity through that experience. Yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of like that whole subconscious thing that I was talking about before, where it feels like, like I'm not, I guess it's just a feeling most of the time. So anyway, sorry, I'm being so aloof right now, but it's,
it's beautiful.
It's the best I can explain it.
You mentioned that when you were young, I know that you grew up in Vancouver. Is that where you were actually born, in Vancouver?
Yeah. I was born in just outside Vancouver, this town called Port Coquitlam, and it's this sort of like sort of just like a suburb by this like famous river called the Fraser River. And you know, I just kind of grew up hiking around sort of Canadian wilderness, I guess, and you know, just doing all the Canadian stuff that we do over there. So yeah.
I mean, you mentioned being in your room, and I have 4 children, so and the 2 youngest are 8, and I, you know, observe children and their play. And at the moment, children are very much on technology. How do you, what do you think drew you and inspired you to be able to let that creativity come through you at such an early age?
I don't know. I feel like maybe I'm a middle child. So, you know, a lot of the time, like I would just be kind of, I don't know, like left to my own devices in a way. Like my older brother would go off doing stuff with his friends or whatever. And then my younger brother would be maybe too young to really connect and play with. So I would just spend a lot of time alone for some reason. And yeah, and I was always kind of a homebody, and I still kind of am. And I just find a lot of comfort in like sort of being more solitary. And I find I get charged up, like my energy levels are good when I'm not in big crowds and stuff, if that makes sense. Because I know that some people love a big crowd and like a big festival, and they get really charged up from that and they get energy from that. But I find that kind of drains me a little bit. So I'm kind of more of a sitting around drinking tea kind of guy, I guess, in a way. So yeah,
I'm with you. Yeah. I mean, I wanted to go somewhere else, but now I'm just going to do a little, I don't know. I want to go now to just ask, following on from what you just said, how do you go then to be able to be present and be in front of crowds? Like, you supported Damien Rice. Was it one of your first big, you know, how do you prepare yourself being an introvert and being more of a homebody to be able to hold space for such a large crowd?
Yeah, it's funny actually. It's actually getting like I'm getting more anxious as I'm getting older about it a little bit. Like I kind of feel like almost like it's becoming a little bit more overwhelming, but I have these sort of rituals I do where I like to kind of do a little bit of sort of, I guess you would call it meditation, where I just like to kind of have like a really still 20 minutes before I hit the stage. And then when I jump on the stage, I kind of try to channel like the energy of the song, and I kind of just close my eyes and sing and just try to, it's not that I'm trying to block out everyone, but I feel like it can be kind of distracting for me to get into my zone. So I try to sort of create the relationship with the audience so we can kind of give and take from each other a little bit. But yeah, it's funny because like you mentioned it, like playing live, like I feel like I haven't played live in so long because of obviously the lockdowns and stuff. So that's, but like the last show I did at this place called Emworth Theatre, I felt like a little bit of a disconnect with sort of myself and the music and the audience and stuff. So I'm actually kind of excited that I got to have a break and kind of hit a reset button, because I think I was feeling maybe a little bit burnt out from touring so much. I toured like, you know, did 2 world tours essentially like in the past 2 years up until that point. So I was feeling pretty like kind of almost like the clown of the circus that's just like, oh man, I'm tired of this, like I need a little break, if that makes sense.
Oh,
you know,
completely.
it sounds kind of weird.
It
Yeah,
completely
sort of a
makes
weird thing to
sense.
say.
Yeah, and I think that the current situation that we've all been experiencing on a worldwide level, especially musicians that I'm speaking to and creative souls, it really has given them an opportunity to reset. I know you're a dad, so it's okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's okay.
Oh, we have a little one coming in here. Oh,
That's
sorry.
okay. Go.
Oh, Meeks. Oh, can you take this up to mom? Is that okay? Okay. Sorry.
I'm a mum. I'm a mum. I understand.
Go. Yeah. Okay, go. I feel like that guy. I don't know if you saw that BBC thing that was like a meme where the kids are like walking around. He's doing some press thing. It's super funny. Anyways.
Oh,
sorry.
Yes. I started this with homeschooling during COVID and had the kids in the other room, and yeah.
Oh, wow.
So what I was saying was, I'll start. So it's very much been a time to reset and to really look at what it is you do want to do. Like, you're still doing, sounds like you still want to do what you're doing and still share the music, but it very much is a time where we're able to reset and reevaluate and contemplate on how you want to show up during those experiences. And I love how you shared, like, taking that 20 minutes of quiet before you actually hold space for the crowd. Yeah.
Yeah, it just makes the world a difference, because it's quite an anxious, like, you can deal with a lot of anxiety on stage, because I've had moments where I feel like you start the show, it's going great, and then you have this middle slump and you're kind of feeling weird on stage, and then you get back into it, and at the end of the show you're like, oh, that was a great show, but it's this emotional roller coaster while you're on stage and no one can see it. And I'm sure many artists deal with it. You could be Justin Bieber in a giant arena, thousands of people screaming at you, but I'm sure he still has that same thing where you might have a little slump in the middle where you just feel like it's almost like it's not like you're questioning why you do it, but you're kind of it's almost like you lose the moment or something like that, and you have to kind of reset, if that makes sense. So
makes sense. It does make sense. I want to remind you of something that you wrote, because it really was inspiring. I'd love for people to know it's possible to show up somewhere with nothing but a bag of clothes, a backpack, and a guitar, and end up with a life you love. That's my story. Let's go back to yeah,
that's man, I just can't even believe that it even worked out like that, because I had no intention of staying in Byron whatsoever. I think I was supposed to stay here for three months or something, and now I have this full-blown life, and I have a financial situation where I'm like feeling okay, and it's it's a weird thing, but I definitely worked really hard. I remember I would busk on the street, if I didn't have 3 gigs a week, it would feel kind of like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, so I remember there was a while there I was working really, really hard, and taking advice and just sort of absorbing as much knowledge and stuff as I could, just to kind of keep my I don't know, just like to get to that next level, I guess, whatever that was, for myself, like creatively, professionally, like the whole thing. And but it's funny though, because if someone said like, would you do it again? Like, I totally would. I'll probably do things differently too. But it's a funny thing, because if I look at it on paper, it's such a scary thing to do. But in the moment, it didn't seem so scary to just drop everything and just go for it, But I feel like that. I feel like COVID's definitely gonna help people realize like what their life really means to them, rather than just like numbers in a bank account. You know what I mean?
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
I completely know what you mean. And it comes up on all the talks at the moment, just recognizing what's important to you, what do you value, and why are you doing what you're doing? What is your intention behind it? So that is my question to you. When you came over, and I read that you were making music back in Canada, and you were also working in a skate shop, so you were juggling, you were still juggling things back there, and then you came over for a holiday to follow your brother. What was your intention behind getting on the street and busking, rather than just hopping in the water and skating around the streets of Byron? Like
well, I guess I did that too, but I guess it just was was almost like I was just curious because in Vancouver, right? Obviously, because it's so cold, you can't really play music all the time.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge advantage. I know no one talks about that with Australia, but you know, Australia has so many great acts and so many great live acts. But I think that has something to do with the fact that you can tour all year round here. You can play music anytime you want, even if it's the middle of winter in Byron, you can play music. And meanwhile in Canada, like you can, but you wouldn't really want to jump in a van with your buddies and go across Canada over like, you know, December when it's ice on the roads and things. So
Yeah.
I feel like that was a huge thought in the back of my mind. I was like, well, if I'm going to stick around for a bit, I might as well take advantage of the good weather and try and play as much music as I can. And, you know, and then I guess the other thing is too, like you kind of, I guess at that time, because it was quite a few years ago when I was first starting to busk in Byron, and there wasn't a ton of songwriters. There was sort of a lot of sort of more reggae kind of jam bands and stuff was happening at that time. And that sort of almost John Butler, Xavier Rudd thing. And I was kind of more just doing straight up songwriting, like songs. And so I guess I kind of stuck out a little bit on the street. So it kind of helped doing that sort of thing. And then I just found also like, you know, I was just generating an income that was just so good. I was surprised. I couldn't believe it. And so I kind of just thought, well, I'll just do this for a while and see where it leads me. And then one door opens up another door, and then, you know, you end up, you know, sitting in your own house and you're like, how did this happen? You know? So it's sort of this a cumulative process. It's like focusing on all these small wins, and then eventually you end up like, you know, looking back and thinking like, wow, that really added up to actually something, you know. And it's it's a funny thing.
I feel like saying, just keep swimming, you know?
Yeah. It is like that. Like I think anything you do, like if you have a clothing business or, you know, whatever, like a podcast, anything, like if you just keep doing it, you know, because obviously I've seen, this is an interesting thing that I noticed the other day was I was in this radio station contest in Vancouver, and the band that won, they won like $100,000, and they were like the next big thing and all this stuff. And like this year they announced that they broke up as a band. Whoa. I was like, that's kind of crazy, because I would have thought that they would have just went on to do some crazy stuff and the whole world was their oyster. And I just thought, that's so strange. Like I'm still playing music, but these guys aren't. And I'm like, that's such a weird, like how things turn out. Like you just don't know where things are going to go. And it was sort of this moment of like, if I was going to give advice to anyone younger right now, I'd like, just keep doing music. Like it's more of a consistency thing than it is whether you're the best singer in the world or the best songwriter or the best whatever. It's more like just keep at it. Cause like I feel like consistency is harder than having talent in a way, because it's easy to be good at something, but it's hard to be consistent in something, in my opinion, from experience.
Yeah. And I also think that I want to say here that what comes through with you is that you really love what you're doing. So I always say to the young people, you know, if it's something that you're passionate about and that you really love, just keep doing it, because, you know, you will be provided in whatever way that is. It will lay a path for you. And sometimes it's a path you least expect. What were some of the points on the path? Because you were playing in bars like a few times a week in cafes and then busking on the street. You're saying you're doing quite well with it, but there must have been some pivotal points. I think it was with Pete Murray, Kasey Chambers, that were the real door opening moments for you.
Yeah, well, that was two big ones for sure. Like both of those people saw me playing shows and busking, and just kind of, we connected like in some way. Like Kasey Chambers was a funny one. I didn't know who she was because I was from Canada, and she came up and bought a CD and then tagged me in her post, and it went crazy. It was like, you know, whatever, 5,000 likes or something. And I was like, who's this? And then asked my partner, and she was like, oh, that's like the biggest country singer in the country. I was like, what? So I was just, you know, I thought I blew it, but then the next day I saw her busking, and then we just kind of connected, and then, you know, kept in touch. And then we started doing some touring together. Went to America, and she's one of the coolest people I've ever met. And then same with Pete Murray. It was a similar situation where we kind of just, you know, stayed in touch, and I did a tour with him, and sort of one thing led to another. And I think, it's such a, you know, but then I've also had doors slammed in my face too, which is funny.
Yeah, let's mention
in my
that.
bios and stuff. Yeah, I always think like, because it always looks so good when you write down like your bio or your press release, you always want to look good. But
Hmm.
I remember there was the lowest point for me was like I was in Sydney. I flew to Sydney to have this meeting with this record label. I won't say who it is because I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but I ended up going to their head office. It was this huge record label. And I was in the office and they're like, okay, the owner of the record label is going to see you in a bit. Just stay downstairs and wait in the studio to play live for them, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, cool. And I was like, oh, this is my big moment. I felt like I was on The Voice or something. And I ended up having to wait down there for almost 4 hours. The guys were so inconsiderate and just
Whoa.
I was just sitting down there getting so nervous, getting so worked up, and they just I guess they just didn't really care. And I was super anxious. And then they came down, I played for them, and then it just sort of they were like, cool, not our thing, see you later. And that was so heartbreaking for me because it was like it was my big moment in my head, and I was like, far out, I can't believe they passed. And then it was kind of like I had to like regroup after that because I was like, what am I gonna do? Like, was that the moment? Was that when I was supposed to be successful and I'm not going to be now? Like, it was a really strange moment. I had 2 labels pass on me one time, and now I'm signed to one of the labels that passed on me earlier, which is funny. So you just don't know. But like, anyways, long story short, it was just like it was like one of the worst breakups, if that makes sense, because it was kind of like I felt betrayed by my own instincts. Like I thought I was good enough to do something and I realized I wasn't. So, and I think it's healthy to always have that because that's going to be a constant in everyone's life. You're always going to have those moments. But yeah, that was a big pill to swallow for sure. That one. Anyways, I wanted to share that because
I love that you share that. I had Jamie Caddo that did One Giant Leap, the movie, who's also an incredible musician. And one of the things he shares in his talks, very inspiring, but he says, you've got to welcome in the no's. It is part of the yeses. So welcome them in and embrace them. And that's part of the journey. So I thank you for sharing that because it does look amazing, like from Busker and then all these incredible wins. But I'm sure there was some moments when you're sitting and going, what am I doing this for? And where am I going? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's some like seriously low points actually. But then I have this one other story where I had my first kid. I was pushing them to daycare. I like didn't have any money. I was just freaking out. Like, how am I going to pay for anything? And I had just signed a publishing deal with this great company. And it was sort of the only iron in the fire at the time. And I was like, just, new parent, no money, renting in Byron, thinking I'm going to get kicked out of my house in any moment because the prices just kept going up. The stress levels were, as high as they can be for me anyways, because I like having security and stuff. And then, I get this phone call from my publisher saying that this big movie wants to use one of your songs in it. And I was like, oh my God, like this is it was almost like a miracle. It felt like I was saved or something. And so that was the polar opposite of the record label thing. It was like this moment of like, holy, like the timing couldn't have been better because it was just, I was in the stripe. I remember just thinking like, I'm in over my head. I shouldn't have done music. This is, really not paying off. And then after that, I feel like after that movie sync where it got into this movie called Bad Moms, it really just catapulted my music into other places, and yeah, that was a really funny moment for sure to look back on. I was like, oof.
And that was Sweet Jane that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so I love that you shared this because there are those, almost dark nights of the soul where we're sitting there, and especially being a parent and knowing that you need to provide security and safety for your partner and this little child. And it does feel sometimes like, I'm paying for childcare, but I know this feeling, and it seemed like the miracle was this breakthrough of this door opening because you had faith in what you were doing. You still continue that faith, Yeah.
Yeah. It was funny. Like it felt like I was on like standing on the edge of a cliff though. You know what I mean? Like when you get to the end of it and you're like, man, what am I doing? But I guess it gets to a point where you're so invested in it that you're like, this is me. This is all I can do, and I'm just going to have to try really, really hard. So you know, but I think every artist probably has these stories. I'm sure some other artists have more dramatic stories than this for sure, but that's kind of my story of like the sort of the roller coaster of being an artist, I guess, of like, you know, ups and downs and things that are, you know, you just don't know what's around the corner. So
I think you're very humble saying it that way, because I think not all artists have that drive to continue going when they do hit the brick wall. So I think there's something within you that allows you to keep going, and that's why the miracles have shown up, you know. So
thank you very much. Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah.
And not only have they shown up, there was just from there, it seemed like a roller coaster ride with the album Hemispheres. Is that the right album? It just
seemed, that's the one.
Yeah, and then you collaborated with Julie Stone on Breathe It In.
Yeah.
Wow, Julia Stone,
really
isn't it?
cool.
I said that wrong. You collaborated with Julia Stone on Breathe It In, and that was an interesting experience as well, because you knew each other, but you hadn't worked together on a track.
Yeah, like honestly, I met her briefly because I played in this band called Empty Warning. Like I played one show.
Okay.
And we played at the Metro Theater opening for her, and I talked to her, and it was like just sort of like a, hey, how's it going? See you later. And then that was years ago. And then years later, I ended up, I don't know, I kind of knew her brother, had a couple nights out partying with Angus, and essentially just kind of knew the family just sort of like casually. And then I knew their manager reasonably well, and I just kind of said like, I knew they were in town. I said, well, if Julie wants to do any writing, kind of just, you know, let me know. I'd love to write with her. But it was sort of like a long shot, like this isn't gonna happen. But and then he calls me back and he's like, yeah, she can come around tomorrow. I was like, what the heck? I was like, clean the house. So, we gotta clean the house quickly. It was such a funny moment because I just didn't know. But I guess that's just one of those examples of like, you just don't know, you just got to ask, and you're not really sure what's going to happen. So but that was
like
really
interviewing
cool
you, Garrett. I just had this feeling, and I was like, I'm going to interview you on Friday, but I didn't know. And then when you said yes, I was like, I'm going to get ready to interview you. You know, it's like...
Oh, it's my pleasure. Honestly, it's nice to chat.
Yeah, it's so nice to chat. So Breathe It In, and then we kind of, where am I going from there? You just made me like laugh then. So talking about the roller coaster ride, and then you've also been working on lots of albums. So how did that all come in, being a producer as well as a musician and an artist?
Yeah, well, it was almost like a necessity, right? Because when I made this record, that kind of the most pivotal record in a way, like in my past, was this record called That Lone Lonesome Sound. And when I basically recorded that record myself, because I just didn't have enough money to record it with someone. So I just bought whatever gear I could get. It wasn't anything fancy, and just recorded it. And then I basically just kind of, like started asking friends like, hey, like, you know, because they didn't have any money either. It was like Kyle Lionheart and Ziggy Alberts. And I was like, yeah, if you want me to record you, I'll record you. It's all good. And we're all just broke busking on the street, like as a bunch of group of friends, essentially. So, you know, initially it was like me, Kyle Lionheart, Ziggy Alberts, and Luke Morris just playing on the streets of Byron. And then we all know what happened with Ziggy and Kyle and Luke. Everyone's kind of found their own success. So, you know, down the track, like I recorded this first song I recorded for Ziggy was this song called Runaway that just turned out to be his big breakthrough hit. And then it kind of, just all turned into this big sort of thing. Cause like he got successful, and then my friend Kyle got successful. And then I worked on a guy named Jack Botts. He got successful. And I was just like, what's going on? And then I guess it just turned into this job that I didn't even ask for, but I just got, because I just love music. So it's not like I love sharing it. And I'm not the kind of person that wants to hide tricks of what I do or try and keep things from people as a competitor. I've never really been a competitive person. I just feel like the more people that can enjoy quality music, the better, you know. And so I kind of feel happy that I'm like a part of that scene that happened, that coastal folk movement. It kind of, it's still happening now, but when it kind of broke through a few years ago. It was kind of a cool experience to have, you know, all these folk songs getting played on Triple J, and I'm like, man, I recorded like all of those songs, like they're playing
What a
my living
feeling.
room on the radio. Yeah, it was the weirdest feeling. So, but yeah, so in a sort of a nutshell, it was sort of this accidental job, you know. But I did study like audio engineering and stuff when I first got out of school, so that was a really big help. And you know, and so, but now it's like you know, I'm a producer. Like I have platinum plaques on my wall for producing, which is so wild. I feel kind of bad for people that really like that's their one passion, you know. I feel kind of guilty that like I got the success like out of, you know, I just feel like I got lucky. So, you know, so sorry to all those really great engineers and stuff that, you know, if you're grinding it out, I'm sorry.
I think that again,
So,
you're doing what you love, and it comes through, you know. And I mean, to be able to have friendships with Ziggy Alberts and Kyle Lionheart and Pete Murray, there must be something within you that has attracted these friendships to be long lasting and for them to trust their art within you, you know. So hats off to you.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, thanks. Well, yeah, it's a big job, but it's, yeah, it's really, really fun. I wouldn't trade it for the world for sure. It's so good.
Because it's
Yeah.
an intimate experience again, isn't it? Sharing that space with an artist and letting them share their vulnerability with you so that you can almost bring it to the light. Yeah.
Yeah, it is really strange. Like it can either go one of two ways. It can get really dark and you're kind of sort of in this space of like no man's land or something. When you're trying to record a song, nothing's working. Or it's like this fluid, amazing experience and you just feel like you're flying, you know? So, but I guess, yeah, it's like anything, right? It's just, you know, at the end of the day, it is work, but yeah, it's
Work
the
that
best
you
job
love.
ever for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Was there
100%.
someone in your childhood that inspired you to have this passion for sound and vibration and music and lyrics coming through you? Was there some key points that broke you open to be able to share this?
Well, I guess my mom's record collection was pretty slick. Like it was Joni Mitchell, you know, Paul Simon, lots of Bob Dylan, and like there was just such a good plethora of music I was growing up with that I just, yeah, I was just lucky that my mom was cool and had wicked records. You know, we listened to the Beatles and stuff when I was a kid, and it just really like opened the door. I think one record from Bob Dylan like really blew my mind. It was almost like a magic trick how he could sing a melody and say words, and it would just, it's almost like it was like Inception. Like my idea of the world changed for that moment. I was like, whoa, that is crazy. Like, and it just was the first kind of really turned me on to music, like in a different way, like almost more spiritually rather than just like, oh, I like this song's cool. You know, it became almost like I don't want to say religion, but like a belief system for me. So that's why I'm so it's such a sacred thing for me, music. So
I love that you say
yeah,
that,
I
because
guess
I think music is religion.
yeah, it is. I think, well, I think, yeah, it's unfortunate for me because I get so uptight about it. Like if I hear a song on the radio that I know is just like a moneymaker, it kind of like makes me feel a bit like, because like I know what a good song can do for people, and I feel like it's such a wasted opportunity to promote something that's not going to give people something more, you know. And it doesn't even have to be a sad song. It could be a catchy song. It could be a uplifting song, but you know, sometimes it's the message or the idea behind it, you know, can be a little bit more fulfilling potentially, you know. So anyways, that's just us snobbing out here on our music.
No, but it's I mean, I remember, is it true that The Voice actually asked you to be part of it and you declined? That was one of the things you declined because of this, what you're talking about,
Yeah.
the intention behind that commercialism in the music industry.
Yeah. They asked me for like every year for like 5 years. They'd email me like once a year, pretty much. And I would just be like, you know, I was always very flattered though. It wasn't like I was like, oh, I'm too good for it. But I just kind of knew like that was more about TV ratings than music. And fundamentally that show, I have a problem with it because they're playing with people's hopes and dreams. Do you know what I mean? And their ideas of themselves. And I think it's so dangerous because people, if they don't go through well with the show, they would feel terrible. Like I know a lot of my friends that have been on the show have just given up music because of that show. And I just think that's garbage, because, you know, just because Delta Goodrum doesn't want to spin around in a chair for you doesn't mean that you're not worth something, you know? That's kind of how I just feel like it's like, almost like, who are you to tell the world what they want, what they should hear, or what is talent? You know, you don't, you know, so yeah, I guess it's sort of rebellious inside me. I just thought, I can't be a part of something that's just not doing the music world any good. They're just trying to get some ratings for, you know, Channel 7 or whatever it is. So yeah.
I want to ask you there, because to be able to busk in front of people, going back to that, it does take a certain amount of worthiness. And I think that's what you're saying with the voice. Like, you know, it's about us knowing our worthiness rather than asking permission from someone else to see that within us. So what is it that helped you to know your worthiness? Was that something that you came to along the journey, or have you always had that within you?
I think it's like a really slow, well, for me, it was a really slow build. Like I didn't wake up one day and think like, oh, I'm like great songwriter and great producer, and I'm just, this is me. It was like a very slow evolution of confidence, and it's still evolving to this day, like where I, you know, I take a note of, like, if I get a nice message about my music or something, or someone stops me after my live show and says, you know, tells me a really compelling story about how my music has, you know, sort of sat in their life as like maybe a good friend to comfort them or something, and all that kind of stuff. Like it really means a lot to me, because, you know, that's like the ultimate for me. It means a lot more than Delta spinning around in a chair for me. Do you know what I mean? So it's sort Delta. Of like, yeah. I think I really like Delta. She seems like a sweet girl. I'm sorry, Delta. I can use Seal as example, any of them, but yeah, yeah. So it's funny, because at first I it's almost like when I first started, I knew I wasn't that great, and it was almost like, I want to be great, and this is as good as I can do right now, so I'm going to release this. I know I will do better later, but this right now is the best I can do. And I think that's how I try to keep my mindset all the time, even if it's, you know, I've released a better song before, or I will release a better song later. It's kind of like, right now in my life, this is the best I can do, and I'm proud to sort of do this, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I think if you don't have that mindset, you'll just go crazy, and you would never release anything, because you'd always think, well, I'll do it better later. And you definitely will, because, you know, it's not the last song you're ever going to do. So that's always been my philosophy. It kind of keeps me sane with releasing music, I guess.
I mean, it's like letting out the shows. You have to embrace imperfection, otherwise you would never release anything to the world, I find.
Totally, because it's just, it's never gonna, and if it was perfect, no one would like it anyways, because it's just has no personality, right? People like personality. So
and authenticity. I want to acknowledge your partner, and that you're a father of 2 daughters, if I'm correct. And where did that happen? Because I mean, did you have the intention? It sounds like you didn't have the intention to stay in Australia. And were you running away from something, and then, you know, you ended up chasing your tail because you ended up finding something? Can you explain a bit personally?
Yeah. It was essentially like, I had been going through like a tough breakup, and it was sort of one of those breakups that where you're on and off again for like, you know, it feels like a year. You're kind of getting together, breaking up, and it's just a super unhealthy situation. And I just thought, like, I just need to break the spell. And I was just totally wrapped up in this really unhealthy kind of situation. So I decided just to pack up and get out of here, and went down to Australia to visit my brother. And then that's where I met my partner, Celeste. And it just sort of all kind of kicked off, and things kind of just, you know, one thing led to another. And then it just sort of ended up this weird sort of accidental, like nothing was like, I didn't have to try, if that makes sense. Like it felt like it was a really effortless sort of,
sorry.
Oh, that's all right. An effortless type of scenario. And then having 2 kids was, you know, another sort of, it wasn't a surprise, but it was definitely like all right, I guess I'm diving in, let's do this, you know. And yeah, if I was going to give advice to anyone, actually, I would say really consider if you're going to move to the other side of the world, because it's such a big mental game for you to deal with, because you, especially when you get to having your own family, it can be such a troubling thing sometimes, because you just want the comfort of your parents when you're raising kids. Or
Mm,
there's just certain things that you kind of really miss, because you realize that families are there for a reason, if that makes sense.
yeah.
And so there's all kinds of things that happen when you leave, because it's not like I left on bad terms with my parents or brothers or sisters or anything like that, because I love all them dearly.
Mm,
So it was sort of this, yeah, it was like an unfortunate circumstance that I didn't really think about until it was kind of really at the forefront, when my daughter Lila was born. And I was like, oh man, like, as much as I love this scenario, but this is going to be tricky, because I
mm.
really want to try and involve everyone in my life as much as I can, right? So
How
yeah.
has how
So
has the experience been for you living during these times, especially away from your family?
yeah, it's been kind of strange, because I always knew, like, in the back of my mind, like, if I really needed to go home, I could just
Mm,
say, okay, guys, we're going, like, we're going to
mm,
go visit in Canada in a month or something like that. But now it's kind of almost impossible to do that. So you kind of feel a bit landlocked. And I don't know what it is about not having any relatives by blood in your country, but it does have a little bit of like a isolated island feel to it. I
mm,
can't really explain it, but you feel like you're kind of really alone, if that makes sense. Even though I have my family and stuff, but I have to take care of them, so it feels like I'm sort of left to like it's got to work, if that makes sense. Like life
mm,
has to work out, because I got nothing else that's gonna be able to sort of hold up this bridge or whatever. I'm trying to think of an
mm,
analogy, but if
mm.
so, yeah, like, I guess COVID, that's been a little bit in the back of my mind, sort of as a struggle, sort of just to try and come to grips with the fact that, yeah, everyone's far away and you probably can't see them for a while. So
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people will be feeling what you're saying there, because it's definitely a time about us finding that home within ourselves, because it
Mm.
is, that stability is being broken, and yeah, it's about finding that within yourselves. What are some of the things that are helping you both be strong as a pillar, as a family unit, to keep you grounded so that you are able to continue to share what you're sharing?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like trying to give each other like space as well, like, because it is such a, like, we don't really have much external family around here, and so it's sort of like just to give each other like time to like do your own thing for a bit,
Mhm.
because like when you have little kids, we're kind of just getting out of like the really little kid phase, and it's sort of like it's nice to kind of get a little bit of freedom back, where you can sort of have some time to yourself, just to do whatever. Like, it sounds ridiculous, but just go to the gym, and just go run on the treadmill for whatever, that kind of thing, where you just have this moment to yourself where you can kind of zone out, or kind of think about your day, and sort of have this more bird's eye view on the situation. Because when you're in a family, you know what it's like it's almost tunnel vision sometimes. It's
Mhm.
Groundhog Day, and you can't
Mhm.
see the big picture.
Mhm.
You can't see that your kids aren't going to be little forever, and you need to cherish this moment. You're kind of in the trenches, trying to make it all happen. And I think when you have this time alone, you can kind of get back into perspective, and you can kind of really value what you have, but I
Mm.
think so. That's one thing I've kind of been learning this year, is and also because of the isolation too, like, of last year. It definitely was a challenge to keep everybody sane, if that makes sense.
I mean, it's
You
really
know?
magnified relationships, hasn't it? Everything that was, out of balance within your relationships has almost had the light shone on it, and we've had to look at it all at the
Yeah,
moment. Yeah.
totally. Like, everybody, yeah. Like, I feel like it would be really tough. Like, if you lived in New York or something like that, a small apartment with your partner. Like, I feel for people in America, because they just were totally let down, I feel, in a way, and they're just stuck in this scenario where it's like, they're just struggling mentally. We're so lucky here, really.
Mm.
Like, it's amazing. So are you in Bondi right now? Are you in Byron, or? Where are
I
you
live
located
I
right
live
now?
in Sydney, in the
Oh,
inner
cool.
west, near Marrickville and Newtown, and so not far
Oh,
from the
nice.
Enmore
Oh,
Theatre.
beautiful. Oh, beautiful spot.
And I
That's an
am
amazing spot.
I know what it's like parenting. I'm a single mother, which I don't like it to be a label, but I
Mm.
really cherish those moments when I can go for a walk or find some stillness
Oh,
amongst the day. And it just, I think the word is, it just completely resets you and gives you that energy to go and make the dinner and do the bedtime grinding and, and all of that. So,
yeah. Well, you can enjoy it then, because
yeah.
otherwise, if the minute you're not enjoying it, I feel like it's so tough. I've been watching this guy. I think his name's Gabriel. I forget his name now. Sorry. He's a doctor from Vancouver, and he's a great sort of he does like parental psychology sort of
Oh,
thing,
yeah.
and he's
Yeah.
kind of rethinking the whole parenting scheme of things. Like timeouts aren't the best thing because you're punishing your kid for
Yes.
feeling vulnerable and stuff. And so I've been really fascinated by that and just sort of trying to get into psychology of what your kid's really saying, not the literal thing, but how do they
Yes.
feel inside. And that's been a huge thing for me. I've been just trying to, because obviously we're dealing with cabin fever kids, and that
Yeah.
they're going to misbehave because they're just stuck in a house, or whatever, and they weren't able to do as much. So I felt like
Yeah.
I kind of almost saw like, okay, obviously the kids, it's not their fault if they're feeling like this. Like this was back in whatever, August or whatever. I was like, okay, obviously I need to improve. It's not them,
Mhm.
I need to like figure out how can I make this situation work better, and who knows, we might not be out of the woods with that situation anyway. So
One of
so
the
I'm kind of,
things, one of the things I was chatting with Danny Carr, married to Ash Grunwald, up your way. She's living up your way.
yeah.
We were talking about the book, Love Languages, and how that it really helps, the 5 love languages, to help figure out what your children's love language is. And, because it's healthy for them to feel their emotions. And, sometimes we feel anger and frustration and love and kindness, but it's about not making those other emotions bad, isn't it? And just letting them have their moments of their tantrum without it being our tantrum with their tantrum is the key.
Totally. Because it's such a funny, well, it's so hard. Like, it's almost like if we're tired, if we haven't got sleep and stuff like that, it's almost like 2 kids fighting,
Yeah.
Rather than an adult and a kid fighting. I've definitely caught myself where I'm like, am I just being like a kid right now? Like I'm like being a kid. Like I need to grow up. Like, what am I doing? Like, control yourself, don't get all flustered and huffy puffy with something that's simple, but it's so easier said than done when your candle's been burnt at both ends, and maybe you have an album release coming or something, and you're all stressed out about all these other things, and then it just so happens your kid is feeling that, maybe your energy, and it's just like a mirror that you're like looking at a mirror at yourself, and it's just like you're fighting with yourself, and yeah, I think having kids is definitely one of the most humbling experiences, because you just realize like you really figure out who you are, if that makes sense, in so many ways.
To me, that is part of spiritual awakening, is either being around children, not necessarily having to birth them yourselves, but to be in the presence of children, because it is that mirror that we see within them, and to learn how to be non-reactive and to hold your center around that is a gift in itself for all relationships, Yeah.
Totally. Well, like today we were, this is an interesting thing. Like today we were dealing with this guy at this service station that wasn't exactly being super polite. And basically, like, I kind of had a thought to myself, like, maybe it's, maybe he's suffering with something, you know what I mean? Maybe he's not happy within himself, and that's why he's acting this way. And rather than trying to pit him as like this guy that's like, some jerk and, whatever, like kind of putting this negative thing on it, I decided to think of it as like, well, I wonder what's going on with him, not, and to give him certain, like, not apologize, like not be dismissing what his actions were, but just try to understand where his headspace is at with this whole, the whole thing. So that was an interesting moment for me, just to practice that and just think like, maybe who knows what this is from, it's a humans are complicated, so
to not make assumptions and not take it personally. I think that
totally,
we're so quick to react to people being rude, and if we can just you know, being the seat of the soul and just not take it personally and just let them have their little tantrum and then not make it about you, you know?
Totally. Well, I found like as soon as I had that perspective of it, it was like almost like diffuse the negative like energy. I was like, well, I don't like, this has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
You know, like it's almost like it kind of, yeah, like blocked it almost. So, and in Byron, like living in Byron, obviously you can imagine right now it's like a absolute, it's almost like a class civil war here, because everyone's just, you know, there's rich, super rich people, and then there's people that are getting booted out that were kind of middle class kind of people. So there's this whole scenario of, you know, everyone's kind of on each other's nerves in a way. That's what I've been noticing. You know, everyone's complaining about the town constantly, all the locals and stuff, saying they can't go in there and they hate it, and everyone's, you know, kind of the worst person imaginable. And you know, it's sort of it's a really strange time for if you live around this area, if that makes sense. I'm sure Bondi probably went through a similar thing a few years ago, where it just felt like this big, you know, sort of reset of value systems and what people are really about. And, you know, it turns into this sort of money scenario, you know, where
I wanted to just share that what it seemed like your intention through what you're doing in your art is, you say, I love when someone can attach their own story to a song. Music for you is there to be like a friend, to comfort you, and to be a sense of freedom. So can we sort of wrap it up there? That seems what your intention is through what you do. Is that still your intention through what you're doing now in these times, after everything that you've shared, that you've come to a new awareness?
Yeah, totally. I think this awareness kind of came from like, mainly when I released that Sweet Jane song, was like, because I wrote it about my mother, right? And her father passed, or my grandfather passed when she was really young, and she just had a tough time dealing with it, as you would, right? And so sort of this narrative I thought was so clear throughout the story, but then everyone found their own narrative and just attached it to it and used it as like a medicine for them. And I was like, this is incredible. Like, I can't believe it. So since then, I still write exactly the same way, but I have this sort of in the back of my mind, like I'm almost hoping that someone just puts their own narrative, their own story behind it. Yeah, because at the end of the day, like our lives are just stories. Like if we look back in time, like our story, like you have an amazing story. We all have amazing stories to tell. And I just feel like if this song can be even like a bookmark in the story, where they are like, when I listen to this song, it reminds me of this time that I overcame, or this person that I miss, or whatever it is, that to me is the ultimate value in music, because it's sort of this, you know, it's like I guess a bookmark would be the best description. It's a beautiful sort of way to, sort of feel the song and get to know it. So
one of the other songs that you wrote was I'll Be Around, and that was another song of hope and to do with grief. Can you share a little bit about that track?
Yeah. So that one was a friend of mine, like my sort of, I guess, my mentor, I guess you would call him. His name is Anthony Lysenko, and he was a producer, and he gave me my first kind of big break. He sent the email over to Sony Publishing, and they signed me because of him. And he recorded one of my EPs, and he was the first person to believe in my music, essentially, and champion me. And unfortunately, he was battling with depression and anxiety, like, and it just got to a point where he just couldn't do it anymore. And unfortunately, he kind of lost his battle with it. And it was very sudden, and we all were very surprised. And it was sort of this weird moment of like, it was almost like I didn't really believe it in a way. And so I wrote this song. My mom was visiting me at the time, and we were just talking about, you know, Anthony and all the sort of other people in our lives where we wish we could have kind of comforted them, even if it would have done nothing, but it would have just been a nice closure for us as a person, you know, and just understood where they were coming from, you know. And so that's kind of what I wrote that song, was sort of the kind of like, I'd be there for you if you wanted me to, you know. I can't say it now, obviously, but you know, that's sort of my way of saying it, I guess, because I think that's something I'm just gonna have to live with for the rest of my life. It's just this sort of, you know, when someone takes their life, you just have to always ask yourself, what if, especially if it's someone so close to you that you wanted to be, you know. I wanted to be this guy. I wanted to be a successful person in the music industry, and here he was, you know, driving a cool car and working in beautiful studios and amazing artists, and you know, meanwhile he's just struggling, and so it just, yeah, I guess it just proved to me more like that it's not really about the accolades of what you do, it's just how you feel about what you do, you know. That's the most important thing, because there's no sense in being successful or, you know, having these sort of, you know, great moments in life if you're not actually feeling fulfilled from them. You know, you might be more fulfilled doing something simpler, you never know, right? So yeah, so I guess that's kind of what that song was, sort of a nice way for me to kind of deal with that grief and just kind of come to terms with what the reality was, I guess, in my own way. So yeah.
I mean, it's interesting that both those songs came, you know, through that, the grief that was felt through your mother and yourself. And I think that those kind of experience helped to bring you to who you are today, and help to keep you reminding yourself, why am I doing this, and keep you kind of on track to reevaluating now and then, and checking in with yourself and being accountable, you know, to not get lost in it, as you're saying.
Yeah, well, I feel like always the best songs I write are from things that have happened, or real people or real things, because I think like you can't really make that up. Like sometimes I'll write songs with people, which I love doing. It's really fun, but often more than not, it's very hard to write about like something so real and visceral like that, because you just, you know, it's hard to open up to someone the same way that you can open up to, you know, your guitar and just a piece of paper, you know? So it's, sometimes you just got to have that privacy to write a song like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. Is there something that you're dreaming up at the moment that you kind of have a little fantasy about that you'd like to call into your world at the moment?
Yeah, well, I would love to, because I've been doing lots of productions on my tracks, and I've been finding myself really getting, I wouldn't say carried away, because I feel like they're serving the song and the production serving the song, but I would love to, from a musical standpoint, like have a collection of songs that are so stripped back where it's almost like a vulnerable state, and I'm just showing this vulnerable side. I'm not hiding behind any production or anything like that. And that's been on my bucket list for so long, and I feel like, okay, I got to do it. I got to try and withhold like any insecurities of my voice or my guitar playing or anything, and try to keep things as real as possible. And that's kind of in the back of my mind for the next sort of, I guess, goal for career wise. And then I guess personally, I would probably say trying to, I guess, value relationships more, if that makes sense. Like not just professional ones, like your friends, obviously your immediate family, that's something that's obvious, but you know, more external things that you don't think are as important, but they actually really are, you know, like the casual friend, I think is more important than you think, you know, just to kind of shake up your day and make you feel like you're a part of something bigger than just your little kind of community, you know?
Yeah.
So that's another sort of, those are the two things I'm kind of thinking about at the moment. So
thank you so much for being on the One Space Love Show and for sharing so openly and vulnerably. It's the first time you and I have met, so you know, this is an intimate chat, and I really appreciate you showing up.
Oh, of course, my pleasure, honestly. So it's such a pleasure to be talking to you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
One space love, one space love, one space love.